Hey everyone, Dane again. Been a little while since I've been down to the shop to get anything done. Just been really busy with life. But after finishing up a bunch of console-related modding recently for my buddy Jay over at Retro Game Boards, I thought it'd be cool to switch gears and do something for arcade stuff. And so, you know, for a long time, I've been wanting to build an OpenMVS console. And I actually recently got in my awesome laser bear printed OpenMVS shell. And, you know, that's going to be a bit of an undertaking. But before starting that, I was like, hey, it'd be a good idea to update the UniBIOS on my Neo Geo. And it kind of got me thinking, you know, like, hey, why not do a video to show people how to update UniBIOS? And thinking about the consoleizer, doing that for one of these MV1C consoles is a little trickier than doing it for one of the like MV1FZ consoles that has a more standard chip. So tonight I thought I would show you how you can basically build your own Neo Bios Masta, because I haven't seen any for sale online for quite a while, or just go ahead and burn your own EEPROM to put in a standard Neo Geo. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so first things first, you're going to need to go download your V4 Universe BIOS. You can go to unibios.free.fr/download to grab that. You just click on that and download it, and that is what we're going to use to burn to our EEPROM. All right, so now that we have downloaded our UniBIOS, we need to burn it to a chip. And we are going to need a 1024 chip. So I have found a handful of these on eBay. Can't really find them right now on any of the usual electronics retailer sites. But I've got an AT27C 1024, and that'll do it for you. Now, some of these pins got a little bit bent up, so I'm going to hit those with my pliers, straighten them out just a bit. Be kind of gentle when you're doing this. You don't really want to snap any of them off. There we go. I'm just going through and making sure that they're all straight. Just like that. That looks pretty good. And this side just has a couple out down here on the end. Usually when pins are kind of bent like that, it's not the end of the world. You just need to go in and straighten them out a little bit. So our chip pins are all straightened up now and ready to go into the EEPROM burner. So we're going to drop that in, close it up, and then we're going to plug in our FlashCat, which really this is just an awesome little USB programmer. Okay, time to burn our ROMs. Let's go ahead and open up the FlashCat USB utility. And we can see that it has detected my Atmel AT27C 1024. So we're going to click over here on the EEPROM tab. And then we're going to click on this little red arrow icon to load the ROM. So I'm going to navigate to where I have dumped my UniBIOS, and it's a ROM file, and this is looking for a bin, so we're just going to set that to all files. And then we're going to click on the UniBIOS ROM, hit open, hit OK, and it is going to write the BIOS to our chip. And it's that simple. It actually goes really fast too. That simple. And you can see it even says Universe BIOS 4.0. And now to double check, we are going to click on the button, the magnifying glass button, and we are going to navigate to that same spot. And we're going to check our burnt ROM against the file that we just loaded. Okay, and it's a 100% match. Our ROM is burned and we are good to go. Okay, so we are going to want to check and make sure that our UniBIOS works. So I'm going to pop it into this MV1FZ revision Neo Geo, and we're going to check and make sure that it loads properly. So I'm going to pull out my copy of Windjammers there, best Pong clone ever. And we're going to pull this plastic shield off. Just removing the 4 big screws in the corners. Okay, there we go. So then we just lift off the plastic piece. And now we can see that I have a version 3.2 UniBIOS in my old MV1FZ. Excuse me, this is an MV1FZS motherboard revision. Now, you can pull these a lot of different ways. The thing that I found to be the safest, and actually I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a bit. There's a lot of different ways you can pull these. I have found that using the flat side of a pair of tweezers to go in under the chip and lift up slightly is not a bad way to do it. You just have to work one side a little bit and then go and work the other. But really what works best is one of these Jonard chip extractors. And you just set that down on either side of your chip. Put your 2 thumbs on there, pull these buttons right at the same time, and lift straight out, and your chip will come straight out of the board, just like that. Okay, so here's our recently burned EEPROM. We're going to go ahead and open that back up. And this should slot right in. Right there. Now, some of these pins are actually a little wide, so I'm just going to use the old trick of laying it on its side and bending it over just a little bit to get all of our pins to fit. Should be a little bit better. The way to orient it, you can see there's a little dot here and a triangle. And this little notch, we want to line this notch up with the silk screen on the board that shows it to the left here. Oops. Popped right out on me. I was just lifting it out to see that everything was lined up properly on both sides. And it looks like it is. And so just pressing down with equal pressure on both sides to seat our new EEPROM in the MV1FZ. So I'm going to go put this back together and hook it up, and we will check it and see if it worked. Okay, we got everything hooked back up. Let's turn it on and see what we get. Hey, there we go. It says UniBIOS version 4.0, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot the system. We'll kick into our UniBIOS. So, yeah, it says right up at the top, it's UniBIOS 4.0, so it should have all of the latest features. Pretty cool stuff. There's like a hardware test in here where you can scroll through and see different things. You can check the buttons on your controller. In this case, I'm using the tricked out Mayflash F300 that I did a video on recently. But yeah, pretty cool just to scroll through there and see it. So anyway, we see that our burn worked. So now we can get into the, what I think is a little more interesting, which is getting this stuff ready for the MV1C. Okay, so we have determined that our ROM burning was good, and I just went ahead and burned another one of these AT27C 1024s to get ready to go into a Neo Bios Masta. Now you're going to need one of these if you want to update the BIOS on an MV1C board. This is actually the BIOS chip right here. Now I've done this, kind of experimented with it last night to figure out how to do it. But I want to step you through what it's going to take to build one of these, which you'll need to update your BIOS on your MV1C. It's actually just a few parts. It's really not too bad. Hardest part that I had was tracking down this bit here, finding the right one. And even this one I ended up modifying a little bit. If you look here, this 68 pin connector that's going to basically sit right on top of the 6800 chip here. And actually I'll show you how that hooks up. So here we have our Neo BIOS Masta, and it sits down right on that chip, just like that. And that is how this interfaces. But for our purposes here, what we're going to need, and you can see that I had to modify this a little bit. I had to cut out this inner plastic portion to help this seat with that. I'm sure that there's an exact right pin connector out there, but this is the one that I could find, and I'll shoot you an image of that in a link and stuff in the description. But before we can get building one of these, we need the parts. So we're going to need that pin connector. Of course, we're going to need our AT27C 1024 chip to actually burn our BIOS on. And we are going to need our Neo Bios Masta board. Now, lucky for us, this is an open source project, and all we need to do is Google Neo Bios Masta and look up the OSHPARC for it, and you can just buy the boards right on OSHPARC, which is what I did for this. So really straightforward. Google it, you'll pull up, you'll see the boards, and in fact, actually, I'll pull up the webpage and show you what that looks like. Okay, I pulled up our OSHPARC page. You just go to oshparc.com/profiles/Neo Turf Masta to bring up the Neo Bios Masta PCB here. And it's really straightforward to order. You're just going to click on the Actions tab down at the bottom. And actually, let me rearrange things just a little bit here so you can see easier. All right, so you can see that there's this little Actions tab at the bottom, and I'll go ahead and jump to that. Click on Actions, and then just click on Order Board, and you fire that off to OSHPARC, and they'll have it ready to go for you in a week or so, or however long it takes at the time that that you put this one together. Okay, next thing I've done is pull up the eBay page where I found my 68 pin connectors. These are Samtech PLCC IC socket SMT 68 sockets, and those are the 1.27 millimeter pitch, and these will interface properly. Again, this one has that plastic bottom. I had to cut it out. It's actually not that bad to do, and I'll even show you how to do it in the rest of this video. But those are what you're going to need to interface with the socket, excuse me, with the 68,000 chip on the board. Other than that, you just need your AT27C 1024 chip. I had luck finding them on eBay. That's what I suggest you do until, our big supply warehouses like DigiKey and Mauser and Arrow start having stuff like this in again. Who knows when that's going to be with the part shortage. But that will get you all the parts you need to build your Neo Bios Masta. So let's get into that now. Okay, so here we have all the parts that we are going to need. I did pull out one of these 40 socket pin connectors that you will be able to pop in here if you want to be able to quickly slot in and out different chips. It's not 100% necessary. You can just as easily directly solder in your chip especially if you want it to be a little more low profile. You can solder it in just directly like that. So I think I'll do that for this one. You can see the other one that I did put in a socket just for, you know, ease of removal if I ever want to swap it out later. You know, because they do update these from time to time. So I don't know, maybe I will go ahead and put that socket in there just for potential time savings in the future, but you absolutely can weld that directly to the board if you choose. But really, the place to start with this is on the opposite side. And the way to line this up, you can see that there are two little tabs here, and those actually need to hang off the side. And then it's just going to be a matter of lining up those really, really small pins, just like that. Now, soldering these does require a little bit of fine pitch work. I actually did it with this chip in place, which definitely would make things a little bit trickier. You know, I was hoping that I wouldn't have to remove it, but it turned out later that it just made things easier to remove it. So for this one, I think I'm going to go ahead and try to cut the chip, or cut that plastic out early. Now, what I will say is if you do it the other way, the nice thing about it being all soldered down before you cut it is you can use some nice side snips once it's welded into place to just go in and individually chop each little plastic support that's in there. That is how I did it on the one that I already completed. But yeah, first things first, we're gonna pre-tin this board. So let's do that now. I'm gonna go ahead and fire up my iron and get my fume extractor going. I'll get that all situated and then we'll get to it. Okay, let's go ahead and get this board tinned. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of flux. Flux is definitely going to be our friend on this because we need really, really thin coatings of solder. And I'm just going to go through and I'm not really worried about any bridges or anything like that right now. I'm just trying to get the pins coated. Now this is more solder than we'll be using on the final thing, but I'm just trying to get a nice kind of base coat on here on these pads. And you can see I'm just sort of quickly brushing the solder that's there onto the pads. And I'm not worried about it being a little messy at the moment, and that's okay. So after that first pass, you can see it looks like that. There's a couple little bridges. Again, no big deal. We're going to clean this back up. All right, so a bunch more flux. Flux is very much going to be our friend on this. And so now I'm going to try to remove all of the excess solder from these pins just by quickly sweeping across and lifting up the excess. Trying to get in as close as I can. Now the reason I'm doing this is because we don't want big mounds of solder on these pads. We want them to really be pretty flush. Again, this is just a fast sweeping motion. All right, there we go. I've actually maybe removed a little bit too much there, but this is one I would rather kind of err on the side of there being too little. And you'll see why when we get in to start in on the actual connectors. They are very, very small on this. All right, there we go. Doesn't look too bad. I'm going to hit this with Q-tip, clean it up a little bit, and kind of take a look at what we've got so far. Okay, there we have our freshly tinned X68000 pin connectors. So that is going to be perfect for hooking up our socket. Okay, next we have our socket. I'm going to pull out a little bit here because I'm going to be modifying this to make it a little bit easier to weld to our board here. Now the way I'm going to do this is to basically go in with my side snips and cut the plastic at each one of these posts. Now I kind of clamp it and then lift a little bit. I'm going to do that for each one of these. Clamp and lift. I'm doing my best not to hit the metal pins that are just underneath that plastic. And they are very fine, so it would be very easy to mess up, to mess those up. So I'm just going to go through and basically repeat that process for the whole thing. It's going to take a minute, so I'll just go ahead and cut and come back when that is all done. Okay, so I've finished cutting all my supports. You can see that those are cut through. Now, when I did this, I mostly found it helpful to actually press the thing down and hit them with the side snips just to help keep from hitting the other pins. Once I'm done, just push that through like that. Now you can see that I even did kind of bend a pin there, which is not great, so I'm going to have to go in and adjust that. But otherwise, it doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look like we messed anything up. Now you can see that there is a little bit of crud left in there from those posts. So I'll hit those with an X-Acto just to clean it up even better and make sure that it can interface with our chip properly. Okay, so I have decided that chopping those posts without there being any support on those pins is probably not the best idea. I'll do that after I get this welded into place. So now what we need to do is tin all the pins on our connector. And this is another very fine pitch job, so I'll pull in as close as I can there. And you can see a couple of these got bent a little bit. I don't think it's going to be too big of an issue. But really, we're going to do the exact same thing we did for our board. We're just going to use some flux on these pin connectors, just like that, and we're going to get them tinned up. Okay, I know that's off kilter a little bit, but that's about the best I can get. But you can see that those are tinned, and they're not going to look super pretty. When you're working on stuff this small, the point is just to get a little bit of solder on there without messing stuff up too bad. And it's possible that cutting the plastic supports first was a mistake, but I think we're going to be okay, even with a couple of these that are bent, like that little one right there. In fact, we're going to start working on that row right now. Use plenty of liquid flux. Don't be afraid to use it. Definitely going to be your friend on these. Man, I'm sorry. It's really hard to keep these right in the right position when you're zoomed in this far. Well, I somehow managed to misshoot tinning the rest of this. It's not really a big deal. It's the same as the rest of it. We're just going through and getting all those pins tinned. But now we're into the really fine stuff. And you can see I have switched out my soldering tip for a super fine tip there that I'll be using in a minute. But the first thing we need to do is get our socket lined up. And so the way we're going to do that is basically there's these two little posts. We're going to let them hang off the edge, and then we are just going to line up our pins. And that's pretty good. Actually, that is basically right where we want it. And so now we just need to tack down a couple of pieces to hold everything in place. And yeah, that is right on the spot, right there. So I'm going to hit it with some flux. And because we've tinned these already, really what we want to do here is just kind of press down and release. Press down and release. And we're just going to be doing that process for each one of these. And for this, I have not even tinned my iron at all, because I think it'd be really easy to go in and just glom a bunch of solder around, and we really don't want to do that. We just want to use the solder that we've already introduced to the pins and pads to get them to weld the way we want. All right, that's one row. Now with some of these, it's going to actually be difficult to tell if they have fully welded, just due to the amount of solder that's there and how small all these things are. And so in those cases, you can use an X-Acto knife to kind of probe the edge and see if it'll fit underneath. But in general, that looks pretty good. I think that is all welded down pretty well. Here we are all cleaned up. And actually it's kind of funny seeing it that big on the screen. I can see there's a couple of cotton swab, Q-tip wispies I need to clean up. But otherwise, that is really on there pretty good. It's not going anywhere. I think that'll interface with the X68000 chip perfectly. So the next thing we are going to do is go ahead and hook up our pin connector. Let's do that now. This soldering is going to feel like a piece of cake after doing this super fine stuff. So we're going to hook up our pin connector. It's got a little notch down here. We're going to match that up with the notch on the silk screen right there. And drop it in just like that. We're going to go ahead and tack the corner in first. And just realized that I'm still using my ultrafine tip here, so I'm going to switch back to my usual blade tip. Okay, much better. Much better. Got the good tip on there. There it goes. There's one corner. And the other. So that is now held on there just the way we want. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with flux, and we are going to solder this, finish soldering it into place. Okay, there's one side. I ran myself a little bit. Okay, there we go. Almost done. Clean that up with some alcohol real quick. Okay, so we now have our pin connector, our socket connector, and we need to tin these two pads here that are going to interface with the chip on the board. Or actually, they're going to interface with a couple pads where we're going to lift pins from the original BIOS chip. And now we just slot in our BIOS chip. Line up your pins like that and press into place. And there we go. There is our very own homemade, from scratch, not really from scratch. We didn't design the board or any of the pin connectors, but you get the idea. Made our own Neo Bios Masta. So that is going to work on our MV1C. So let's get into how we hook that up now. Okay, so here we have our MV1C board. And as you can see down here on our SP1 chip, which is our BIOS chip, I have gone in and lifted up pins 10 and 12. Now 10 is super easy to find because there's a little white silkscreen line right here in between the fuse. That is pin 10. We skip 11 and then we lift pin 12, which is right there. Now, the process for doing that is very simple. The way that I do it is just to basically take my X-Acto knife, put it under a leg, just like that. Heat the pad, not the leg itself, but the pad that it's connected to, and then just slowly lift to pull those pins up. And as you can see, I've already done that here. Now, there's a couple things we have to do to prep before we can actually finish hooking up to our board. But let's go ahead and do a quick test press. Let's just see how that fits. Now, it'll say top of 68,000 right there. The top of the 68,000 chip is right here, and you can tell just because of the lettering on there, right? So top of the M is top of the chip. And that will press fit just like so. Excellent. Okay, so we have lifted our legs 10 and 12 on our chip and just sort of pushed them back. The other thing we need to do is actually hook up a little jumper wire from pin 21 to pin 10 right here. Should be pretty easy to do. I'm just going to use some Kynar wire for that. So I'm just going to do a quick little run. Actually, you know what? I'm going to cut all the wires I need to do that off camera. It's boring for you to watch me cut wires and get those ready. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, we are ready to hook up our jumper wire. So we are going to hook this to pin 21. Here we go, nice solid weld. I usually use a little bit longer than I need so then I can bend it and figure out how long of a run I'm going to need. And then I can cut it to the shape that I need. So it's really sorry, it's hard to get in there and see with my eyes. There's a little bit of a shadow from the camera. Yep, there we go. That's about right. And so I'm going to go ahead and strip that. And I really just need a tiny bit stripped off, which is always kind of tricky when you're working on a real small piece like that. I think I got it. All right, tin that now. That's pretty close. Now there's a little bit more wire than I'd necessarily like there to be hanging off there, but it's really not going to hurt anything. But I do want it to have just a little bit better connection. So I'm going to pre-tin my iron just a bit. Yep, that's pretty good. There we go. So we're now hooked up from 21 to 10. And now the little pads that are underneath there where we've lifted the legs, and you can see I've pre-tinned those, 10 and 12. 10, I believe, is going to be our CE connection, and 12, I believe, is going to be our OE connection. Let's double check on that real quick. Yep, 10 is CE and 12 is OE. And those are the pads that we are going to be welding to on our Neo Bios Masta. So that means the next thing we need to do is hook up our wires here. Now for these, I need just the tiniest little bit. To weld to. I'm talking real small. because we have very, very small pads to weld to. So can be helpful to remove the fuse. I found that I didn't need to for this, but would not blame you if you wanted to. So it looks like brown is going to be our CE. And I'm literally just going right to the side of the pad. And welding that in. And actually, that is even kind of hard for me to get my finger in there. So I'm going to get out my tweezers so I can hold that in place just a little bit better. Well, I do not like the way that looked at all. So what I'm going to do is retin that pad. Here we go, much better. Much better. Some nice fresh solder on these pads. Oh, camera jumped around on me a little bit there. It's a little bit bigger piece to weld to. There we go. That is a solid weld. You can see it almost looks like it wants to come over and touch that 11th pin, but it isn't. If I was worried about it, I could test the continuity. But that's why I was saying you need just the tiniest little sliver to weld to. All right, there we go. Pin 12 is now solidly welded into place. And man, sorry for this kind of scooting off the camera there. I'm doing that. These are tricky to get zoomed in on. Still learning, but I hope you're finding it helpful. So there is our pin 10 and 12. And that means we are ready to hook up our Neo Bios Masta. All right, so our orange wire is OE. And so we're going to just kind of run this right up under. There we go. And so I'm going to cut that right where I want it. There we go. And we can tin that real fast. All right, so there's our pin 12 going to OE. Just like that. Again, then we can sort of route that under. And then OE, or CE, excuse me. Pin 10 is CE. Strips a little bit more of that than I meant to. It's okay, we'll tin it and trim it. I left myself plenty to work with. There we go. There's CE. Same sort of deal. We're just going to route that under. And I'm just kind of adjusting the wire runs here just to get them into a spot where I like them. All right, there we go. We are well seated, all hooked up, and there is our Neo Bios Masta install for our MV1C. And we are now up to date. That is the most current UniBIOS for the thing. So I'm excited about that. Let's go ahead and hook this all up and see if it works. Okay, it's time for the moment of truth. Let's switch this on and see what we get. It says the hardware test failed. But here it says we booted into the BIOS. So it says the UniBIOS started. Looks like our game's going. I'm kind of curious. Let's get a little... See if we can't get a little audio in here from the game. All right, looks like we got some audio coming in from the game now. Let's see what we got. Man, I love the Metal Slug game so much. Oh, it's so laggy playing through this. Not the hardware, the capture device. and just such amazing animations in the series. All right, well, I am really happy that that worked. Very cool. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for tonight. Got through the stuff I wanted to get to, got a Universe BIOS installed on my two Neo Geo systems. Not exactly sure what was going on with the hardware issue on boot with this. This was a board that I ordered from Mexico, pretty cheap. I think I got it for under $100. But it came in kind of rough shape, not terrible, but it definitely had like a bunch of perfume spilled on it, which was nasty. So I'm going to poke around at this a little bit, see if I can find if there's anything that jumps out at me as being an issue there eventually. But I do plan on having this be my project board to go in that MV1C consoleizer, the OpenMVS consoleizer. I'm really excited to do that. And I was happy just to get through this. I think the next thing I'm going to be doing is a full recap on this. Gonna look into replacing the coin cell. I mean, who knows how long that has been on there. But yeah, just generally getting this going and continuing to do my OpenMVS project. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. You know, these Neo Bios Masta kits are really cool. You know, I honestly think that if you find the right socket for these, it would be a much simpler install even than what I shared tonight. Having to clip out that middle piece is kind of a pain in the butt. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. You know, I love this stuff, and you know, getting to take a cool old Neo Geo and turn it into a console that can go up in my main gaming space, I'm really excited about. But yeah, so if you enjoyed yourself, enjoyed hanging out with me, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe and all that stuff. It just kind of helps me keep doing this. I put a buy coffee up on there, so if you want to you know, support the channel financially, I'd of course really appreciate that. That would be a huge help. But regardless, I always just love to hear from you in the comments. If you have any questions about this, you know, what it took for me to learn how to do it, or, you know, if you just want to talk about retro gaming, you know, electronics, soldering, any of that stuff, I'm always happy to talk with you. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll catch you next time. Bye now.